All right, good morning again, everybody. This is David. We're going to go ahead and get started um, with our webinar today. I appreciate everybody being here for this month's installment in our science communication webinar. And so, with that, our presenter today is Lori Williams, as you can see on the screen. She is one of our wildlife diversity biologists in the Wildlife Management Division, and her presentation today is engaging North Carolina's trout anglers and other stakeholders to help conserve eastern hellbenders. And again, Lori, thank you for your interest in the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Cobb, and thank all of you for joining us here almost midday on your soon-to-be lunch break. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so I'm not interrupting any of the slides. And then I'll pop back in when it's over and see if there's any questions. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about some research we did a few years ago, and we continue to do it now. Engaging North Carolina's trout anglers and other stakeholders to help conserve eastern hellbenders. And since we've got some time and possibly a wide audience who may not be as familiar with hellbenders as others, I am going to take some time here at the beginning to just go over some life history and some neat facts about hellbenders and kind of set the stage for the rest of the talk. So we can't talk about hellbenders without talking about all the colorful names this animal has. Just lots of colloquialisms and some regional names as well. By far, the most common one we hear in Western North Carolina is water dog. But we hear all these other ones too, and there's can be a source of confusion as, you know, water dog is also a name of two other giant salamanders that we have in the east, and we have mud puppy as well here in the western region. So there it can be a little confusing. But some of these other names are really interesting. Grampus is one that you may hear in Southwest Virginia, while Allegheny alligator is fairly common up north, the northern part of its range. But two of the more recent ones that are fun to say and fun to talk about, and that the media and really researchers and biologists have made popular, is old lasagna sides that is indicative of, you know, these ruffle of skin here on the sides of the body, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then snot otter, that's another one that's popped up, and the media really loves to publish that, and kids love to say it. So that's a great name as well. But the official common name, of course, is hellbender, and a lot of people wonder where that came from. And it's typically thought to mean a creature from hell where it's bent on returning. And the first use of the name hellbender, published use, was in 1812 by the naturalist Benjamin Smith Barton. And he kind of credits the idea that the name is referring to the animal's bending movements, or what one experiences in the torments of hell. And he credits pre-Civil War communities in Southwest Virginia with this interpretation. So that's pretty neat to think about. And I know some of you are also wondering that question: where does it get its name? Jumping into some life history and facts about the animal, you can see the range map on the upper left. It's a little misleading, just because you know, Kentucky and Tennessee, the entire state is not occupied by this animal, at least not anymore. So the actual range today is going to be much smaller than that, but within those general bounds. But the hellbender is a giant aquatic salamander. It has rudimentary lungs, you know, really small, kind of vestigial lungs, we would say. And that's mainly for buoyancy control. These are benthic animals, meaning that they reside on the stream bottom, and they've got to be able to stay there. So they really have the ability to control their buoyancy. And the scientific name, Cryptobranchus, actually means hidden gills, or hidden lungs. So that refers to that feature. And hellbenders get over 90% of their breathing is through the skin. The skin is highly vascularized, and you can see the skin folds on the side of the animal that adds more surface area. So it really helps to function as you know, for breathing as well. And no external gills on this animal except the youngsters, the larvae. hatchlings to about 2 years old, they have little external gills, and I'll show a picture of that in a second. But because they breathe through their skin, we call them bioindicators. They're very intolerant of poor water quality and pollution. And I like to think of it as if people carried their lungs on the outside of our body, you can imagine we would be pretty intolerant of pollution too. So you can think of it like that. But the bioindicators that hellbenders are in our terms is really you know, kind of a sign that water quality is good and the aquatic ecosystem is healthy and all things are functioning as it should. If we find a lot of hellbenders, especially in all age classes, and they're doing well as a population, that's a really good sign that that's clean water, and that's good for all of us. They are a species of greatest conservation need in our Wildlife Action Plan, and they're legally protected in North Carolina as a state special concern species. These guys can get very large, around 2 feet in length or maybe more, and can grow to over 3 pounds. They're long-lived, over 30 years. Some say even longer than that, 40 or 50 years. And it takes them a while to mature to adults, around 6 to 8, maybe 9 years even. They're mainly active at night, so they're nocturnal. They are solitary and territorial. They generally don't like each other, but they do come together in the breeding season, and it's a very interesting breeding ecology they have, and probably my favorite thing about this animal. But the male, what we call a den master, as you can see kind of in this upper right, defending his nest rock, but it's up to him to build that nest cavity and then defend it and kind of care and brood those eggs that are underneath for a couple of months, and that's his job, and he doesn't really eat, and he's just on point the whole time to defend, to ward off intruder hellbenders that are trying to enter the nest rock and breed, or to even eat the eggs. So it's a fascinating time of year to watch this animal and its breeding ecology. Some predators of hellbenders include large fish, water snakes, river otters, wading birds, raccoons, and snapping turtles, maybe others. And the bottom right picture shows the slime layer of hellbenders that kind of froth up like this when they're a little under stressed, or experiencing stress. But that's how the nickname snot otter probably came about, is that nice slimy layer on their skin that makes them hard to handle, but it protects the animal because it's distasteful to predators, and it has antifungal and antimicrobial properties, so they can helps ward infection off of away from the animal, and ensures its health. Remember, they are benthic animals, so they basically wait for the crayfish to come to them in a lot of ways, and actively search them out. But they also eat stream bugs, snails, worms, small fish, frogs, salamanders, small snakes, and they're big scavengers. If you clean your fish in the creek and leave that stuff in the water, or discard your bait, they'll certainly seek those items out as an easy meal. May wonder what the mouth of a hellbender looks like. Well, this is it. You can see their teeth, what we call, the teeth on the top and bottom, but it's really a bony, sharp plate that runs across the width of the mouth there, and have very powerful jaws. And an even wider look, again, you can see the sharp bony plate, nice fleshy tongue. And these guys eat by vacuum or suction feeding, rather than projectile tongue like other salamanders do. So they're really limited in what they can fit in their big mouth in terms of their food sources. Let's talk about some of the misconceptions and the negative myths that are out there about hellbenders. We hear these a lot when we talk to people, and that's part of our work, is to increase awareness about hellbenders and to dispel some of these myths. But hellbenders are not harmful. They're not venomous, toxic, or poisonous. They are not eating all the trout. We hear that one a lot. They're not aggressive, but like any self-respecting animal, they will defend themselves. They're not bad luck, and they're not to blame for your bad day of fishing. We hear that one too. But you see in the image here, this hellbender kind of sneaking up to the trout, harvested trout on a stringer at the edge of the water. And this is very common practice. Probably every trout angler does this at some point. But if a hellbender is nearby, it is not going to resist that chance at an easy meal. So this may be where the myth of them eating all the trout comes from, but they are not equipped. They're not running down all the trout in the stream. they're not equipped to that. They can't do that, and they don't do that. But this situation, yeah, they're going to take advantage of it, and they may work on your catch if you don't watch it. Talk about the habitat requirements for the hellbender. They do need clean, cool, well-oxygenated rivers and streams with a lot of flat boulders and rocks of other sizes, and all this substrate needs to be available to them. It can't be buried in silt and sediment. It's got to have space underneath, or at least the ability for the hellbender to make space. And of course, they need a lot of food sources as well, like other animals in a healthy system. In the bottom right corner shows a larval hellbender, and you can kind of see those external gills that it still has, and it will go through metamorphosis and absorb those around age 2.5. But that's I want to show this picture because you may not see many pictures of that or see that in the wild. So the number one threat to hellbenders, definitely habitat degradation, as is the case for a lot of our wildlife species. Poor water quality, silt and sediment, poor land use practices in general, whether it be from agricultural purposes or industrial operations, pollution just running right off the land, straight into the water, lack of riparian buffer or forested cover. So all these things combined and cumulative effects of these types of situations can really decrease water quality downstream. So we can't imagine trying to fish or play or recreate in water like this, or even drink this water, and that goes for the hellbender as well. It's what we want to see when we're talking about habitat for hellbenders. It's nice forested riparian zone that provides, helps cool temperatures and keep runoff from entering the stream. Nice clean water, and lots of rocks of different sizes, again, that are available, what we call interstitial space, the space between and among rocks. Animals use those as well. And this substrate has to be available. They have to have space. And this kind of situation, this kind of substrate and the space between also facilitates their food sources. Other threats that hellbenders are experiencing: habitat disturbance with people moving rocks, or building dams or tube chutes, or rock stacks like you see in the picture on the bottom left. Excuse me. Illegal collection or persecution, where people harm or kill animals when encountered. Barriers to movement and gene flow, such as dams and lakes and reservoirs. Diseases and pathogens, and climate change. So this is the rest of the talk I want to get into. Our research that we did through 2017 and published a paper in 2019. And I would like to acknowledge my co-authors on this work: Jake Rash, our cold water restoration research coordinator, or cold water research coordinator and trout coordinator; John Groves, curator emeritus at North Carolina Zoo; Lori Stropp, fisheries biologist at Pisgah National Forest; and the late Doug Blatney at North Carolina State Parks. So if you remember, we just talked about hellbender requirement or habitat requirements for hellbenders. Well, it turns out what's good for them is also good for trout. Trout need the same clean, cool water, lots of oxygen, lots of different kinds of rock. Excuse me. Lots of food sources, and maybe with the exception of the flat boulders, at least their trout may use that a little less, but they definitely need that size class of rock as well. So this obvious overlap of habitat and resources provides a great outreach opportunity. So our study took data from 2010 to 2017 in terms of our outreach efforts, and quantified what we gained from that work. Our outreach took 3 approaches: in-person outreach, where we have direct contact with people. We may show an animal on display. Print media, that's an ad from our Fishing and Hunting Regulations Digest. Signage, posters, brochures, that kind of print media as well, and electronic media. in terms of social media posts, Facebook posts, e-newsletters, and such. So those are all of our outreach methods. Our objectives are to increase general awareness about hellbenders, kind of dispel all of those myths that we were talking about. And we ask the public for reports of those encounters, when they catch one on their fishing line, to let us know about that, and also to release that animal unharmed. And those common misperceptions that we talked about a minute ago, include the notion that they're poisonous, or they're eating all the trout, they'll ruin your fishing pole, and they're aggressive and will come at you trying to bite you. So this is the range of the hellbender in Western North Carolina. And before we really started our work with the species, which was around 2006, 2007, you can see the orange dots representing all the historical records up until that point. And not very many overall, but the black dots are what we've added to the map since then. Many of these have come from reports from the public, reports from anglers and recreationists. So we can't overstate the importance of the public's help in understanding distribution of the species in North Carolina. You see that nice overlap with the Hellbender Range and our public mountain trout waters within. So again, lots of opportunity for outreach as these resources overlap nicely. And conceivably, there's a lot of people out in the streams participating in recreation and fishing opportunities. So before we started our outreach, which was in 2010, we did have a few records in the database, a lot of mainly from museum data or data from our heritage program, where they've received reports in the past of people finding animals. So a pretty low number prior to 2010 overall. And then you can start to see this increase, this wonderful increase of records coming in, and these are verified records. People send photos or video or GPS points and otherwise describe the animal that we can consider it verified. But you can see our efforts are really paying off. It just climbs over the years. And so these are the data that we worked with in that paper. However, I want to carry it out a little farther. So this is where that graph that I just showed you ended, 2017. And then the last few years have just exploded, and the number of reports that we've received continued to climb, and 2020 was the most ever, just under 250. But last year was not much of a drop, almost identical numbers there. So I hope that 2022 and the future and years to come will also give us this kind of return. So anglers by far are producing the most reports that are coming in from the public. They're the ones that are out in the rivers and often are seeing hellbenders more than others, but recreationists too are seeing a good number of them, and we're getting many reports from that user group as well. Private landowners, not as much, and that may be an opportunity for more focused outreach in the future. In terms of our trout waters, hatchery supported waters are producing the most public reports, and then undesignated waters too. So streams or stretches of streams that aren't officially in our trout program. So those are responsible for a lot of these citizen scientist reports too. Private land, producing a lot of observation opportunities, followed by national forest, and much less on these other jurisdictions. And in terms of where these reports are coming from, this is a heat map of watersheds within the Hellbender Range. And the darker colors indicate a larger number of verified reports that we've been made aware of. And you can see, not surprisingly, our big popular recreation areas, national forests and such, and around some of our larger cities and towns are giving us a good number of observations that people are reporting to us, like here in this area of Buncombe and Transylvania, Henderson, that area, and Yancey and Mitchell, and on towards Boone, and up in Jefferson and Ashe County, that area. What this map shows me, besides that, is the light colors or the gray colors. We're getting very few reports to the west. And that may be that people just aren't seeing them in those watersheds, or they don't know to report their observations, or they're just choosing not to. But this demonstrates some other outreach opportunity that we can take advantage of to try to contact or interact with the public and get the word out in maybe some of these more rural counties and areas that we've not done any direct outreach in. So to summarize that project, we did have great returns on our effort over those years. Observations came from 56 streams. 7 of those were brand new stream records. We had no idea that hellbenders were even there. Most fell within the French Broad River Basin, which is our largest river basin here in the mountains. So that's not too surprising, and that river basin does have a lot of our really popular fishing spots and recreation areas. The Hiwassee to the far southwest was underrepresented, and then the Little Tennessee and Pigeon drainages were also underrepresented, and that, to be honest, may be more related to decreasing numbers. Those 2 drainages are where we think that hellbenders are declining fairly rapidly. So in that case, it may very well be that people just aren't seeing them. We do continue to get reports of dead hellbenders that people find. Most of those are undetermined causes. Some appear to be predation or other means, but during this period of time, at least 2 were intentional from intentional harm. It's very obvious that a person encountered them and then behaved badly and killed that animal. So that still happens every year, despite our efforts to get the word out, for people to leave them alone and not kill them if they catch them or see them. But the best thing is many of the anglers that I've corresponded with over the years do acknowledge the outreach materials they've seen, whether it's Facebook post or they saw a poster or they saw us in an in-person outreach event. That's just fabulous when we get that kind of feedback. But even better than that is when anglers say that their friends, family, or their fishing buddy made them aware, and that's golden. That's probably the best we could hope for, is that if our message from that we're giving out to the public from an agency standpoint, or even through our other conservation partners, if people aren't being reached by that message, then they are probably listening to their fishing buddy. So that's a really good information that we've received over the years. And to conclude, these outreach efforts are definitely worth the investment. You could again see that the map I showed with all those dots we've been able to fill in large part, thanks to the citizen scientists out there. And resource users of all kind can be a good source of data. We targeted anglers, but recreationists are also very helpful in this regard. There are challenges with education and outreach opportunities that remain, including the time it takes to do them, possibly the distance you need to travel to do an in-person event, and just those kind of resources that, with few staff or even volunteers that are available to do this kind of work, it is a challenge. And this example with trout and hellbenders and what they need and the resources they need is just a great example for other conservation commonalities that are out there. And I'll leave you with our costume mascot, Snotty, that we take to river festivals and outreach events, and kids are sometimes scared of Snotty, but others, really warm up to him and love him. But I think this is a great example of, and very biologically correct, I might add, just being creative, with outreach. If you're going to engage in outreach opportunities, think of things like this as well. But I appreciate your time, and I guess we'll take any questions at this point. I will turn my camera back on.
All right, thanks, Lori. Great presentation. A lot of really good work over a long time. As Lori said, if you have questions, please put those in the chat. I'll start out with a couple. One is I know you've given presentations on this work to our commission I encourage you the next time you do that to have Snotty appear with you at a commission meeting.
That's right. Yes, I've already heard feedback about that, and people, threatening to put their colleague in Snotty. And I will add that it was made for a person like 6 feet or taller. So if you're short like me, you may get out of this duty of wearing Snotty.
Yeah, I could think of a couple people I would recommend, but I won't do
Hmm.
that online. Um,
Exactly.
so I will ask you a serious question while I'm waiting on other questions to come in. And I've kept track of who's online, and so a couple of folks that might want to comment on this too. I don't really think are here today, but you mentioned predators and you mentioned otters, and we hear a fair amount from the mountain fisheries folks off and on about otter impacts, especially in some cases at hatcheries. Um, but with the large effort that went into otter restoration in the West, do you think that restoration project has had a long-term negative impact on hellbenders and similar species?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've posed that. To my colleagues and others that needs some research. We need to put a student on that topic because, yes, hard to know. Of course, people suspect that may be the case with the great success of the Otter program in years past. As their numbers increase and their distribution gets wider, it's very possible that some of that interaction and predator prey dynamic could be in play, especially if hellbender population is already depleted or declining. And from what we've seen, and there have been published accounts of otters' predation on hellbenders, and we've had at least 1 or 2 reports here in North Carolina as well. Otters are taking the adult hellbenders, probably more so than the younger ones, and possibly in breeding season when they're out and active in the daytime and they're easy to see. Who knows? We just don't have a lot of good research information or concrete knowledge of just what that kind of predation pressure is. But I think it would be worth taking a look at. I told you about the Little Tennessee drainage, how numbers have just really tanked. Hellbender numbers have tanked in that system. Could that be a result of otter and hellbender interaction and predator-prey dynamic? It's very possible. We just don't have the information at this point to definitively say, but I would love for somebody to study that. We have done through NC State some methods with eDNA, environmental DNA, kind of sampling the stomach content of uh, river otters and a gut analysis. Charlie Sanders did that work at NC State a few years ago. And the few otters that came from the mountains, he did test for hellbender DNA to see if possibly a otter had consumed a hellbender, but we didn't get anything conclusive from that. And it was such a small sample size, and in winter where hellbenders are typically hunkered down for the season. So yeah, I think a lot of work should be done on that. But hellbender researchers across the country are kind of growing in their thoughts that may be a factor in some places.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask you one more. So when I think about mountain streams, I think about altitude and gradation. How far up a mountain stream towards the headwaters
Mhm,
will hellbenders typically be found? I realize there'd be a lot of variation, but
mhm, mhm.
and and part two of that question is, do you think that um, changes in water quality is potentially changing that distribution in terms of altitude or gradation in the rivers?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. A lot of times we think of these headwater tributaries or just the smaller streams that feed a larger river system. We think of them as refugia in a lot of ways, and that's not universal across the board, of course, but often, as you indicated, that's where some of the cleaner water is, especially headwaters that are protected, high gradient coming off the mountain, with good amount of water, good flow, lots of oxygen. So yeah, it makes sense that animals would seek those out and possibly push themselves further upstream. And I do believe that is happening and could be happening more in the future, as well as some of our main stem rivers are in bad shape in terms of just so much sediment covering shelter rocks and depleting food sources and um, affecting breeding ecology and reproduction. So I think that is true. We have spent some time looking at headwater tributaries, and we have found at least some hellbenders using the stream that far up. And when I say that, it's really probably limited in the width of the stream and just what it has to offer. When you get into the features of like plunge pool habitat, as you go farther upstream, you're less likely to see hellbenders there. But some streams offer a lot of good habitat pretty far up. So yeah, and some people have guessed that even with climate change effects or other factors that may be threatening hellbenders, that indeed they may go where the cooler water is. That's something we don't have a good handle on, but it has been proposed as a shift in their distribution.
All right, thanks. I think that's it, Lori. And again, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for all the good work out there. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And with that, I'll just wish everybody a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next time, second Tuesday of the month.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.